Hey there, Internet. Welcome to the Hard On Gear channel, where I discuss and review my used and abused knives and gear. All right, tactical nerds rejoice. There is a knife on the table that you're almost never going to see in my collection. As a Canadian citizen, there's a lot of benefits and a lot of lovely things to be proud of and happy about. Our knife laws are not one of those things. So things that are purely for self-defense are kind of out of the question if you're just going to be carrying them on your person and you want to stay totally within the realm of the law in case you ever got pulled over, or what if you got into a street fight, just a normal altercation, and the cops showed up, they end up searching you, make sure you don't have any weapons or drugs on you, that kind of thing. If they find something like the Benchmade SOCP knife on you, they're going to assume you went out looking for trouble. You probably weren't. Maybe you're just trying to be a responsible citizen and defend yourself. Not getting into the politics. I'm not telling you what I agree with or disagree with. You watch enough of my videos, I'm sure you can figure that out. I'm trying to keep my political opinions out of this so I don't get in trouble talking about this stuff on my videos. The purpose of this video is to show you this cool knife, and as you'll see from the bit of a wear on the coating, I just sharpened it up because the fellow who lent it to me wanted to actually use it as a bit of an EDC knife because we are in Canada. If you did happen to be in the profession of armed forces in Canada, or any other armed force or any other combat trade where maybe you might need something like this eventually, it's something that you might want to look at picking up because there could be a purpose for it. Because something like this, the reason why the sides aren't sharpened is that it's not supposed to be used, or not, I shouldn't say supposed to be. It's not initially designed to be a cutting tool as much as it's supposed to be a penetration tool. And whether you're working in the woods and you're dealing with like a bunch of nasty coyotes running around trying to attack you, steal your wallet, or if you're maybe in the streets of somewhere's unpleasant in a country where you're allowed to carry something for self-defense, or a state where you're allowed to carry something like this, probably a good benefit, because as I'm sure I'll overlay some clips here of me kind of throwing this in my waistline and doing a couple of draws and just giving you an idea of how well this disappears onto your belt line. It's a pretty handy tool if you're legally allowed to carry it, or if you're in a position where you can do so for your job or self-defense for law enforcement or whatever, as like a backup knife for firearm retention, something like the K-Bar TDI was invented for. If you watch the John Benner video about the K-Bar TDI explaining about the offhand draw for pistol retention, stuff like that. Good idea for police officers, I would assume, anyone carrying a sidearm like that. Military sometimes in the same situation. Again, not a great EDC tool overall if you're just looking to cut paracord and boxes and stuff. I'll pop a picture up here of what it looked like before I sharpened it, and I'm sure if you just Google the SOCP knife, is that what it's pronounced, is how it's said, that would be Special Operations Combatives Program. So what's his name here? Thompson. Greg Thompson is I don't know if he's the founder. I think he's the founder, if not the main instructor at least, of the Special Operations Combatives Program in the States. And this knife has become an integral part of that training when the knife stuff comes out. Because this is a knife that's designed to kind of slip on your plate carrier, or maybe on a backpack strap, or somewheres on your kit or in your belt in your waistline where it's not super easily seen, and this ring can essentially be indexed with your index finger. Funny why they call it that. And then you pull out, phrasing, and you end up getting a pretty easy grip on the knife. Now, if you had to go right into a push dagger situation with something like this, maybe not ideal. It's a bit long and you don't have a good grip like an actual push dagger with the two prongs that your fingers and thumb would hold on to. It's kind of hard for me to do in this frame right now, but you essentially, if you're drawing it with a foregrip like that, you can switch it over pretty easily to a reverse grip. Or if you were drawing it and indexing off of your pinky, you draw and then you go right into your grip. But I'll kind of overlay a couple of draws here, and hopefully my clothes aren't so dark that it's ruining the shot again. I know I'm pretty bad for wearing black knives and black clothes and trying to show you this stuff, but the idea essentially is that as long as you know where to find that on your belt line or on your person or on your kit, but the idea is all you have to do is run your fingers along your belt line or your gear, wherever you have this thing stored, and index it, your index finger or your pinky finger, and pull. And then you should be able to go right into what you're doing. Benchmade did not design this knife. This was a Greg Thompson design. He ended up getting one of his, I think, Master Chiefs or one of his senior officers or NCOs to make the prototype for him. And then eventually he ended up selling it to Benchmade, which is why this thing probably costs more than it should for the materials and the, I guess, the size of it really, because the amount of metal used for this and the type of steel, probably shouldn't cost $200. I think it's going to be closer to around 170, 80 American, and then about 200 Canadian. If you get the trainer with it, which this is a self-defense knife, and most good self-defense knives will have a trainer designed for it. And the red trainer that comes separately from this, or with the bundle, is I think pretty much weighted the same, maybe a little bit heavier, and fits in the same sheath. So if you want to actually train with this thing appropriately, which if I ever pick one of these up, which I might, never know, it does have its purpose, I would definitely want the trainer because it's only 50, 60 bucks. And a lot of the times for like a trainer for say like the Endura or the Delica or the Griptilian or anything like that, those are going to cost you 150, 200 bucks, especially for the folders because they tend to be, they have the functioning pivots and stuff. Whereas fixed blade trainers can be a little bit cheaper and just be made out of a cheap, softer steel. So like I mentioned, this thing was not sharpened. The tip was very sharp, and without a doubt, you're going to get this thing through whatever you need to get it through. A dagger does not need to be super sharp on the ends. It just needs to be thin and be able to glide through. The other thing is this is kind of like a convex edge design and grind on this. Now, when I look at the specs, it said full flat grind, but it's a very, very strong convex bevel here. So very, very sturdy, very, very low chance of chipping that edge. And this being a 440C steel. So 440C, not super high grade, kind of, in that same ballpark as their 440HC is what you're going to find on Buck knives, Swiss Army knives. What else am I thinking of? The main generic? Oh, your Leathermans and stuff. Now, 440HC and 440C are slightly different. If there's any metallurgists or metal experts out there who want to give me the full details, but 440 carbon versus 440 high carbon, I'm really not sure. I think it might just be an American versus Chinese made steel thing, because like 440A, 440B, 440C, am I correct in thinking those are like the cheap, crappy steels that I'm thinking of that are all Chinese crap, and the 420 HC is what I'm thinking of for the Buck knives and that. I think that is a slightly different steel and maybe something that's actually like not cheap Chinese garbage. But again, metal people, correct me in the comments. But the thing is with this, where it's not a Benchmade knife, I'm sure there's probably extra costs associated to having the licensing and all that done for Greg Thompson. So this is a bit expensive for the steel cost, but what you're getting is the design and the thought that's put into this thing, and then the trainer available. And then of course there's all kinds of footage and literature involved in with this knife in particular as far as self-defense, and not all just like flashy, and no offense Filipino martial arts or Salat or anything like that, but a lot of the knife stuff out there is a lot of flash and a lot of martial arts, not always a lot of proper combatives and like time and pressure tested stuff that you would actually want to try if you were getting attacked by somebody in a split second situation. So basically what I'm saying is if there's guys who've spent time downrange in situations using these things, I'm probably going to trust their opinion more than people who've only trained in gyms and fought with training knives. No offense to them, because that's all I've ever done too, and to a much lesser degree. So you do what you can with what you can. But if you've got the experience, I'm going to probably take your word for it. This knife is not exactly what I would think of in a tactical self-defense blade. There's some aspects I would change, and I ended up grabbing the Tor Anaconda as we'll say a bit of a crossover from like a graduation from my forestry wildfire world to joining the military. But this is also a hell of an EDC knife if you want it to be. It's designed to be a tactical knife to go on your plate or on your belt. More of a duty belt or military carry though. But it is one heck of a good utility design, very thick, sturdy convex edge, an actual convex edge on this. As you can see, I have touched that up. One comment that I need to get back to on the Tor Anaconda unboxing video is that it didn't come super razor sharp. And mine did come fairly damn sharp. Much like this Benchmade SOCP knife, these knives are kind of primarily made to be like penetrators. They are made to be lethal tools. Now, again, this thing has a lot of crossover. That's why I purchased it. I don't really like buying things that are only single use, single purpose, like a push dagger or stuff like that. Again, in Canada, legally, it's going to put me in trouble if I ever get caught with that on my person by a police officer or anything like that. Something like this in the military, you're going to get away with. But again, utility-wise, you really do have to figure out the balance of like what you're going to be doing the most of, and if it's worth having 3 knives on you to serve each one of those purposes, or if you can get away with having 1 or 2 really good knives that have a little more of a well-rounded quality. Here's me saying that, and I normally have 4 or 5 knives on me, but I know most people typically don't want to do that. So if you don't, you do have to think about what you're purchasing. So the knife he purchased has a folder to go along with this. I don't know if this is entirely what he plans on keeping. I'm sure he's going to add to his kit, and he might have more than this already for his knives and stuff. Typically, a lot of us are getting Leathermans or Gerbers or some kind of a multi-tool as well, just to kind of make sure we can do different stuff with pliers and different kind of weapon stuff that you sort of need a Gerber multi-tool for. I ended up going with Leatherman Mutt, and I did pick up the Morikans Bull here as a good camp and field knife, not as a fighting knife, of course. If I did end up in a situation like that for my job where it was legally available for me to do that, in a situation where I unfortunately had to use freaking hand-to-hand combat, which basically means everything else is gone to shit and you're probably about to die, then yeah, I've got the Tor Anaconda perhaps. But this is more of a everything else I'll be doing with a knife in the field. The Morikans Bull is going to be a hell of a good fixed blade. Certainly thin and not going to be able to do a lot of prying and twisting that a lot of other knives do. But like I said, not everyone's going to want to carry 4 or 5 knives on them, but I do actually like having a few different tools like the Azula 2 for prying and twisting and stuff like that. However, if you were going to only have one on you, the Tor Anaconda is probably a pretty good pick. If you are going to go with something like a decent, nice, small, relatively hard use for the size folder like the Benchmade 940, you can probably get away with not having as sturdy of a fixed blade. You can do a lot of aggressive stuff with this 940. Maybe something like a nail. I'll eventually get one of the Dynamist combat flatheads. Those are phenomenal. The Strider nails, there's different things like that, little pry bars, which would come in very handy in situations like, I don't know, like little tiny, trying to open boxes or even a Pelican case or something like that, or trying to get into a door, like some of those little flatheads and combat screwdrivers and stuff are pretty impressive what they can do. So something like that in combination with something small like the 940-2 and the Benchmade SOCP knife here, I think would give you just about everything you need, maybe in combination with a multi-tool like a Leatherman Mutt or one of the Gerber military multi-tools that I can't remember the name of or the model number of. But maybe that's the only thing I think that's missing from this combination. And I haven't talked with the owner of these knives extensively yet on what his plans are for putting these on his kit or where he's going to carry them. He did mention that somebody, I won't mention from what organization or where or what, but there was someone he knew of who carried a knife like this and apparently enjoyed fiddling with it and just kind of sitting around spinning it. So it does kind of add to a little bit of a novelty fun to a knife when you can have a little bit of fidget factor to it. So whether that's a retention ring like this with, you see the nice jimping on the back here for grip, and or maybe punching if you were in a situation where you wanted to put that on side somebody's temple, depending on where you ended up, I guess, maybe. But yeah. Oh, jimping too on the inside, if I didn't mention, of this grip, which is all skeletonized handle, no G10 or anything on there. But geez, what was I talking about? Yeah, this is not the most comfortable retention ring or fidget ring for that, but that's not what it's made for. It's meant to be able to draw quickly and easily, and for you to be able to either grab something else while you're using this knife or still have this in your hand, be able to use it and then draw a pistol or go back to using a rifle or whatever with this thing basically disappearing. So there's a purpose behind that, and it's, again, not EDC. It's very tactical, very defensive. So if you've got something like this and you're looking to use it as EDC, you pretty much have to sharpen the edges of it, but it still doesn't cut like a nice big bellied knife because the weight's just not distributed right. There is another version you can get of this with one side sharpened with a combo edge, so 50% serrations. You could neck knife something like this as well, and depending on the state or country, neck knifing might be an iffy thing because it's concealed. But neck knifing something like this in this little sheath with the serrated, 50% serrated version gives you a little bit of utility depending on where you're at. But if you're in the woods for a backup knife, great little choice. Would I ever put something like this on my kit, on my tack vest, duty belt, something like that? Probably so. I was actually more impressed with this than I thought I'd be. I've seen this before, and just the look of the handle and the grip and the size of this thing, I wasn't really interested. I thought it would be more flimsy than what it was, and the price of the knife for the steel, not to be a steel snob or a material snob, but sometimes paying $200 for a knife that you're with a steel that you typically see on like $40 to $60 to $80 knives max, if that. I mean, you can get way better steels on $50 to $60 knives. It's just a bit much for me, but I see why they picked that steel. You want something that's soft, so if you're hitting a rib, or I don't know why you hit a rib with this, but if you hit something hard with this, eventually that tip's going to get bent. You don't necessarily want it to snap off like if it was a super high edge retention steel, like even an S30V, but especially like 3V probably be okay because it's pretty tough. But I'm talking more like 204P. Yeah, something like an extremely hard M390 premium knife steel that you do see on some tactical knives. M390 is pretty popular in a lot of Bassinelli and different stuff, but the heat treat would have to be done right, because man, if you chip that steel, it's gonna be a nightmare getting it back. With this 440C, you could smash this onto a rock and get an edge back on it within a reasonable amount of time. So there is a benefit to the softer steel, and because the purpose of this knife is not to do a lot of slicing and have good edge retention, not really as important. So could I ever see myself purchasing one of these? Maybe so. But this would never replace something like the Azula 2 or like the Toray Anaconda or something like a main slicing EDC knife. This would be more of a purely defensive blade. Now, something like this, I would have either this or something like the K-Bar TDI or Shivworks Clinch Pick, or goodness, what else we got? There's a lot of different fixed blades, like EDC fixed blades, even stuff like a lot of Tops knives and SE knives that could be used as self-defense knives. All these neck knives and small EDC skeletonized fixed blades can probably be fastened to some kind of a Kydex sheath, put on the molly, and serving the same purpose. The nice thing with this is, which part of what the design was about, is making sure this doesn't look like a nice big target for an opponent to grab a hold of if you're in a bit of a grappling situation or a hand-to-hand combat situation, and whoever you're trying to deal with sees a knife. Like, for example, you're wearing something like a knife like this on your chest or on your backpack strap and you get into a scuffle. This is a very obvious target for somebody to grab, get a hold of, and go to work on you. So your weapons can become somebody else's weapons very quickly, because they're not your weapons when you're in a grappling match. They're everybody's weapons. Nice thing with something like this, it's extremely hard for someone, especially in a scuffle or some kind of a fight or adrenaline-filled situation, to notice what this is and to think about what they can do to put this into action. That being said, you got to make sure you know what to do if you get a stressful situation and need to put this into action, because you're not going to be able to find this in a stressful situation where your adrenaline and cortisol are pumping through your ears. You're going to have some kind of a habit or a pattern to get to this knife, get your finger where you need to get to, and then know what you need to do to go to work from there. And again, if I haven't mentioned it 14 times already, not an expert on this stuff, and if you know people who are experts on this stuff, maybe listen to them. And then remember that not everyone's that much of an expert on anything, and that everyone's probably wrong about some stuff. So keep an open mind and learn to listen to about as much different stuff as you can regarding this stuff. And if you're going to pick up a specific tactical knife like this, make sure you do the required training to make sure that you aren't going to, first of all, cut yourself. Because one of the biggest issues you'll find out when you're training with training knives, rubberized knives with people, or just against dummies, doing some of the basic Filipino martial arts flow and stuff, you'll cut your hands with those trainers all the damn time. And if you were using a real blade, you would be bleeding a lot. So train smart and make sure you train at all, first of all. But if you're carrying something like this, know your legal limitations. And for the love of God, make sure you're not going to leave this in a spot where someone's more likely to use it on you than you are on them. And that's one of the dumbest things with knives and with a lot of the stuff people want to put on their kit. And it looks cool and it looks tempting, but something like this is probably a better bet. If you're looking for a retention weapon, something like a last-ditch backup. It's small, it's light, it can't be more than like 3 ounces. I'll put the spec up here on the screen with the weight once I search it up afterwards. But yeah, pretty solid choice for what it's made for. Just again, make sure you know what it's made for when you buy it. Like I said, the person who bought this, the main reason he bought this was he had seen a person in the similar line of work who had it, a little more experienced guy, and he had done a few different like tricks with it here and there. But this was also a knife that he had sharpened and used as a utility knife. So, you know, maybe take it out and like cut paracord pretty slick and shove it back in the sheath. So there's some finesse to it. Man, if you're anything of a knife guy and you understand like edge geometry and I guess the structural integrity of a fixed blade knife, this is not a small, thin, light piece of steel. And you could do what you need to do with this knife. You ain't gonna be able to cut a lot of stuff like EDC, like boxes and stuff. You're going to get tired of cutting cardboard with this thing after a while, but it's not designed for that. So yeah, as a knife person and as a fan of just a good design of a knife, great. As something I'd purchase as an EDC tool, not so much. But Greg Thompson, obviously you know what you're doing. Apparently you guys have been training Special Forces guys for quite a while, so I'm going to take his word on it. There's certainly some marketing and some branding going on, so Benchmade and SOCP are going to get a lot of props on the internet from designing this. So a lot of the stuff they have, the literature and stuff, is built around the marketing of this knife. Always keep that stuff in mind, but I don't believe their purpose was to make money. I do believe it was to make a good tool to enhance their training. So feel free to check their content out, of course, because that's all good. And check out the other stuff. I've got a video on this 940 that buddy lent me after I sharpened it up. I did touch both of these up, of course. And right now I've got what I think is a nice balance of this knife, which it'll cut, it'll slice hair. I could get this thing popping off hairs like some of my other slicier folders. But at that point, we're completely taking away the structural integrity of that blade, and we're getting too thin behind the edge, and then this knife is no longer the stout dagger that it's supposed to be for the size. So yeah, hopefully this is what he wanted out of this, which was he wanted this to be able to cut and slice paracord and all that stuff while still be able to do the pokey stuff. So this becomes a lot more of a viable knife just to have on your person. Whether, I mean, for someone who's not planning to use it as a defensive weapon, because of the weight and because it now has a little more utility, and because really you could throw this thing on most spots on your kit or on your belt and completely forget about it until it's there. And having something super light and compact like that is better than having a huge freaking K-bar that you never carry if you're never able to use or carry it because it's impractical. So a lot of pros and cons to think about here depending on what you're doing, but heck of a cool knife. Again, the price-wise, the butterfly tax is in full effect here on the Benchmade side. But again, where he had to get this, Greg Thompson that is, had to get this prototype made from a company. I get it. Sometimes you got to mess around and things aren't always going to cost as low as you want them to. So the $250 cost for the trainer and this version, maybe I'll end up picking one up eventually, but it's not going to be the top of my list. And if I ever do, it's going to be because I'm actually going to be deploying or working up to go somewheres. And I think I'm actually going to need something like this because I don't get a lot of joy out of something that I can't really use until I'm in that situation. So the Tor Anaconda gets all kinds of other use. And if I ever get in a situation where I want to put that on my kit, where I might actually need it for a profession of arms or something like that, it's there. But it's multi-purpose, and it's something I could always see myself using, and if I don't lose it, I'll probably have this thing forever. This thing, great, not really my style as much. That being said, this really hits my tactical heart, and I'm probably going to maybe see myself getting one of these throughout the years if the opportunity arises. So thanks for hooking me up. Appreciate you lending me these two knives, and thanks to the other fella, you know who you are, Mr. S, who's got this Recon 1 in my hands. Got me very much missing my Recon 1, which I'll have back soon. So, yeah, cheers, fellas. Appreciate the hookups. And, yeah, if you're interested in the SOCP knife or you know anything more about the history, or if you have any other cool tactical knives that you think would be better plate carrier or, you know, sidearm retention knives, whatever, feel free to comment down below. And as always, hit the like button if you want to see more of these knife videos from the Hard On Gear channel. And hitting that like button is one of the better ways to help support the channel and get this video up to the top of people's search bars. So thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next one. This is the Hard On Gear channel, signing off.